Welcome to Pontification Nation. I'm your host, Ricky Skittle, coming to you live, as always, from my mother's basement, and we have a great show lined up for you today. I'm going to discuss the Michael Cohen testimony. We're going to do this in two parts. The first part is going to be where we discuss the actual testimony and all of the fictitious lies that are within it, and then we're going to discuss the total disparagement that Lanny Davis put this man through to try to lessen his sentence, but I don't think that anything that happened yesterday is actually going to lessen his sentence. He might even have a greater sentence because he's going to have more criminal referrals because he lied to Congress again. Like, repeatedly lied to Congress again. The way we're going to do this, we're going to let Michael Cohen speak, and then we are going to discuss why Michael Cohen is not telling the truth, or maybe open up a little bit more about exactly what he is saying. So let's start.
Yet last fall, I pled guilty in federal court to felonies for the benefit of, at the direction of, and in coordination with individual number one. And for the record, individual number one is President Donald J. Trump.
So let's examine that for a second. Now, I don't think there's any doubt that Cohen pled to a bunch of stuff. None of this was actually adjudicated in a court of law. There is no reasonable doubt. There is none of the stuff that goes on in a court case. But let's just examine the statement that he committed all these crimes at the direction of President Donald J. Trump. Counts 1 through 5, evasion of assessment of income tax liability. He goes on to state later that Donald Trump did not direct him to do that. So that's 5 of his 7 or 8 counts. Then count 6 is false statement to a bank involving getting a line of credit. And then we go into the campaign finance violations. So this is where, it would be into Cohen taking direction from Donald Trump. And here's the way I look at this. This is a plea deal. They can write anything they want in it. So the way that FEC laws work is that they are handled civilly. Like 99% of them are all handled with you pay a fine for whatever went wrong. The only way that they charge you criminally is if there was some kind of intent or malice involved. So essentially, Donald Trump needed to pay off Stormy Daniels and have her sign an NDA. So from Donald Trump's perspective, he just needed to pay off Stormy Daniels $130,000, and he was going to do that out of his own money. So Cohen goes and sets up the LLC, runs money through it, and then they come up with this scheme where they're going to pay Cohen $420,000 for the $130,000 he paid Stormy Daniels. Now, I don't know Donald Trump, but ask yourself this question. Does it sound like something Donald Trump would want to do? Pay $420,000 for a $130,000 bill and pay all of Michael Cohen's federal taxes on the income and his state and city and local taxes on the income? I don't know how retainer agreements work at a private firm, but maybe there's payroll taxes they have to pay on that as well. I don't know the tax law on retainers. I'm not a lawyer, but it does just seem odd to me that Trump would be willing to pay $420,000 for a $130,000 bill to keep more and more of it hidden. I mean, at the end of the day, the NDA should have hidden it. This never should have seen the light of day because there was an NDA. If it wasn't for Avenatti, none of it, we would not know about any of this. So I don't believe that this is a campaign finance violation. So I looked up, who's gone to jail for this type of stuff. The person that I found was a guy who worked at the Fiesta Bowl, and what he was doing was he was telling employees of the Fiesta Bowl to make contributions to a campaign, and then he was paying back the people who were making the contributions out of their personal money with Fiesta Bowl money. And there was like an intent, and it was this big elaborate scheme. And, it seems like that is criminal. This, paying off a girl who you may or may not have slept with so that she doesn't talk about it like 6 days before the presidential election, to me, doesn't seem like a criminal offense. That seems like something that everybody does who has money and is questionable on their relationships and, etc. But we know that a lot of people do this. So let's talk about who does this. It appears Congress likes to pay sexual harassment claims and sexual assault claims and file NDAs. So here, going back to 97, we have 40,000, 103,000, 72,000, 45,000, 121, 3.9 million, almost $4 million in 2002. Those must have been some bad things, only 10 of them. 2003, 720, 388, 909, 849, 4 million in 07, again, 2017, almost $1 million. Now, those are eight suits, right? So it's $200,000 each, maybe, or $250, whatever. Or, that's not right. $150,000 a piece. But in any case, this is Congress. These are the people who are saying that what Donald Trump did is totally off the charts and is an impeachable offense. And I just find that disingenuous at best. And this is only what we know. We don't know what we don't know. Who knows how much of this stuff goes on. And it goes on all over the place. Now, I'm not saying that it's right if Donald Trump cheated on his wife. I don't think that's right. But at the same time, is it an impeachable offense? Is it something that people get sent to prison for? No, none of that. The other thing you need to remember about Cohen in this testimony is that throughout, in the second video, we'll talk about this, but throughout the questioning, he denies. He says that everything in this in this plea agreement is factually inaccurate, except for the part that deals with Donald Trump. He says all of the tax stuff is there's a bunch of facts in there that aren't accurate, but I signed it. It's a plea agreement. But he never says any of the facts about the FEC violations are, false. So it's just disingenuous for him to say that everything that involves him that's in the plea agreement is factually inaccurate, but everything that involves Trump in the plea agreement is 100% accurate. That doesn't a Venn diagram. It's not. Those things are mutually exclusive. Now let's see what he says about Donald Trump and his desire to be president.
Mr. Trump would often say this campaign was going to be the greatest infomercial in political history. He never expected to win the primary. He never expected to win the general election. The campaign, for him, was always a marketing opportunity.
Now let's think about that statement for just 1 second and live in reality land with the rest of us, Michael. I can myself imagine Donald Trump in the beginning saying, you know what, I'm going to do this. If it doesn't work, it'll at least be a good marketing campaign and we'll get some brand recognition out there. I could see that in the beginning. But as time wore on and he saw that his message was resonating, I saw a person who was furiously busy trying to get the message out to more and more people and build a diverse coalition that he could try to attempt to defeat Hillary Clinton with, or Bernie Sanders, because there was a point in time where a lot of us thought Bernie might actually get it. And I will tell you this, when Trump announced, my personal feelings about Trump until I started listening to him talk at these rallies was I did not like this person. I thought he was disgusting. I thought he was filthy. I didn't like the way that he treated women. I didn't like the way that he acted. I didn't like the way he talked. He's a braggadocious New Yorker. He's just not my kind of guy. I couldn't sit down and have a beer with him. And then he started talking. And I was like, holy crap, this guy talks like everybody else. There's no political correctness. He's actually talking about the things that are wrong with the country. He actually might want to help. It might be worth a shot to try something different for once in our lives. So I think Donald Trump's been talking about running for the presidency since the 80s with Oprah. Okay, he's talked about it with Howard Stern. He's talked about it all the time. He talked about it with Megyn Kelly in 2010. He has been thinking about this and preparing for this his whole life. There is no way that I believe that Donald Trump didn't run thinking he was going to win. I think he might have said in passing, hey, if it doesn't work, at least we'll get some brand, we'll promote ourselves. It'll be self-promoting, one way or the other. It'll be good for business, even if I don't win. Now, once it gets started and he starts destroying all those Republicans, then I don't think he would have ever said that. And so I believe that this is false. There might be a little grain of truth in it. If you're familiar with liars and pathological liars, what they usually typically try to do is put a little bit of truth into what they say, and then they sprinkle the lies all around it. So when you hear the truth, you think that the lies are actually true as well. And I don't know this because I lie a lot or anything like that. But, that's the way that the human mind works when you do this stuff. That's why people who lie always get caught, because they tell the story a little different every single time. There's always little details that change. Like, look at the Smollett story, the details that changed over time over the first week or two. Like, that's what liars do. They focus on very small nuggets of truth, and then they extrapolate and expand on that. And then as their story continues, oh yeah, and I remember this now, I remember that, now that I sat down and really thought about it. Yeah, right, dude. The kind of funny thing about this whole situation is what I learned about Donald Trump is everything that I thought about him before he started running for president. He's petty. He has thin skin. He likes to be known and looked at and talked about. He's braggadocious. He likes to save money. He's cheap, even though he's rich. Most rich people are kind of cheap. But all of this stuff that he's talking about, that we're going to talk about here, everybody already knew. Everyone who elected him already knew all this stuff. He was one of the most transparent candidates in history. I didn't know who Barack Obama was before he started running president. I knew who Donald Trump was. All right, moving on. Lanny Davis is so dumb. This is the easiest thing to refute, or, this is the dumbest thing to put in this statement.
A lot of people have asked me about whether Mr. Trump knew about the release of the hacked documents, Democratic National Committee email, ahead of time. And the answer is yes. As I earlier stated, Mr. Trump knew from Roger Stone in advance about the WikiLeaks drop of emails. In July of 2016, days before the Democratic convention, I was in Mr. Trump's office when his secretary announced that Roger Stone was on the phone. Mr. Trump put Mr. Stone on the speakerphone. Mr. Stone told Mr. Trump that he had just gotten off the phone with Julian Assange, and that Mr. Assange told Mr. Stone that within a couple of days, there would be a massive dump of emails that would damage Hillary Clinton's campaign. Mr. Trump responded by stating to the effect, "Wouldn't that be great?"
Now, in relation to WikiLeaks, Roger Stone has said that he didn't talk to Julian Assange. Julian Assange has been on record. I mean, we've seen DMs of WikiLeaks telling Roger Stone to cease and desist talking about them, and then finally, on June 12th, 2016, well before the Democratic National Convention, WikiLeaks to publish more Hillary Clinton emails, Julian Assange. So Julian Assange is telling the world in June that he has it. And then also in March, he put up 30,000 of her emails. I mean, this was very well known that WikiLeaks had this stuff. And when you look at this June 12th, date, think back to Seth Rich. I mean, Seth Rich, this is what happened. It's not possible that Russians hacked the DNC. It's not possible. And let me explain to you why. I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but just for clarity. There are people who have studied this and looked at the amount of time that it took. So there's this group called VEEPs. They're Veterans for Intelligence, Professionals for Sanity. And they got access to some of the documentation that either the DC police or the FBI have on the transfer rate. And the transfer rate of the data that came out of this DNC server was faster than any transfer rate possible over the internet. So it had to be done locally with a device like a thumb drive. Seth Rich, a Bernie supporter, found out that the DNC was working against Bernie, got pissed off, took all this information, gave it to WikiLeaks, and then got murdered. That's what happened. So Roger Stone had nothing to do with WikiLeaks or understand. I mean, of course, everyone on the planet was looking for these emails at this time. Everyone on the planet was trying to figure out what the heck was going on at this time. This was not something that Donald Trump knew about. I mean, of course he knew about it, but it's not like he's talking to Julian Assange. And frankly, if this were true, it would be under the purview of the special counsel, and Michael Cohen would not be permitted to say it in a public hearing if it were true, because it would be in reference to an ongoing investigation about Donald Trump lying about when he knew about WikiLeaks. So there's just no possible way, because I guarantee you that the special counsel has all the documents related to all the phone calls that went in and out of Trump Tower, because guess what? Trump Tower was being spied on. That's why they left. If you remember my video about Mueller, that's why they left Trump Tower during the transition, because it was being spied on. It was being spied on during the campaign. They have everything related to anything involving Donald Trump and Trump Tower in the lead up to the election. So if this were true, it would be not admissible to discuss in an open setting in front of Congress, and certainly not admissible in his opening 30-minute long statement that no one ever gets in front of Congress. Now about Trump is a racist.
Trump is a racist. The country has seen Mr. Trump court white supremacists and bigots. You have heard him call poorer countries shitholes. In private, he is even worse. He once asked me if I could name a country run by a black person that wasn't a shithole. This was when Barack Obama was president of the United States. And while we were once driving through a struggling neighborhood in Chicago, he commented that only black people could live that way. And he told me that black people would never vote for him because they were too stupid.
Now, I can't know anything about what Donald Trump has said or would say in private. And I'm not sitting here trying to defend any kind of comments that he would have made in private. But what I can say is that Donald Trump, through his actions, has improved the black community more than any other president in recent history. So I don't necessarily believe this in the way that he states it. And at the end of the day, there are a lot of shithole countries. I mean, do you want to go on a family vacation to Zimbabwe? where there's violence and inflation? Do you want to go on a family vacation to Somalia where you can't even go? There's a reason why the State Department has lists about where we can and cannot go. They're ranked, I think, 1 through 5. It has nothing to do with the color of the skin. It has to do with how dangerous people are. So at the end of the day, while not a awesome, great fact about the world, it is a fact that there are shithole countries and that you don't want to go to them. That's not racist. That's just a freaking fact. And trust me, if you want this country to become a shithole country, follow AOC right to the shithole. Now let's hear about how Donald Trump is vain.
As I noted,
nobody knew.
I'm giving the committee today an article he wrote on and sent to me that reported on an auction of a portrait of Mr. Trump. This is Exhibit 3A to my testimony. Mr. Trump directed me to find a straw bidder to purchase a portrait of him that was being auctioned off at an Art Hamptons event. The objective was to ensure that this portrait, which was going to be auctioned last, would go for the highest price of any portrait that afternoon. The portrait was purchased by the fake bidder for $60,000. Mr. Trump directed the Trump Foundation, which is supposed to be a charitable organization, to repay the fake bidder, despite keeping the art for himself.
Now, this is just silly. This is clearly a Lanny Davis construction trying to create a crime. So, it is not a crime to want a portrait of yourself to go for the highest amount. It's also not a crime to pay someone to go to an auction and buy the portrait. Now, here's where the crime comes in. It comes out of the Trump Foundation, right? Let me ask you something. Is Art Hamptons a charitable organization? I don't know, but I'm going to assume it is because it's having an auction, right? So how is it illegal for the Trump Foundation to donate $60,000 to a charitable foundation? I will give you an example. I was on the board of an art group when I was in Philly, and I got a chair donated for our auction. It was the silent auction. And I really liked the chair. So I bid higher than anyone else for the chair and paid for it and took it home, even though I got it and donated it because I liked it and the money was going to a good cause. So at the end of the day, Donald Trump got what he wanted. He got the highest bidded painting of himself, and then he used the charitable foundation to make a donation to the Hamptons, the Hampton Art. Just because it went through another person doesn't mean that the Hampton Art people didn't get their $60,000. Michael? Lanny? You guys this is so stupid. And if you think that we're this stupid, you guys need to go back to freaking New York and just stay there. Let's see what he has to say about Stephanie Clifford, a.k.a. Stormy Daniels.
He asked me to pay off an adult film star with whom he had an affair and to lie about it to his wife, which I did. And lying to the First Lady is one of my biggest regrets because she is a kind, good person, and I respect her greatly, and she did not deserve that. And I'm giving the committee today a copy of the $130,000 wire transfer from me to Ms. Clifford's attorney during the closing days of the presidential campaign that was demanded by Ms. Clifford to maintain her silence about her affair with Mr. Trump. And this is Exhibit 4 to my testimony.
All right. These people are so stupid. It's just fascinating to me. Fascinating. If you paid off Stormy to protect him from his wife finding out, how is it then a campaign finance violation? You just proved that it wasn't a campaign finance violation, because even if he wasn't running, he would have paid the $130,000. Does that make sense? This has nothing to do with the presidential campaign. Donald Trump would have paid this money at any point in time that Stormy came to him. It doesn't matter that he was running for president. I am sure there are many, many, many more of these types of arrangements in Donald Trump's past. It would not surprise me one bit. I fully understood that and was aware of it when I voted for him. Because that stuff is tiny little minutiae compared to the things that we are actually up against in this world right now. So please spare me your garbage BS about how you care about Stormy, how you care about Melania, how you care about anything else. Because you don't. You care about yourself, Michael. You care about yourself. So he goes on to discuss how this is a scheme and it is illegal, but he never thought to consider the legality of it as a lawyer before he actually did it in all of his own name through his essential consulting company. Never thought once to consider that it was illegal, what he was doing as a lawyer. I find that challenging to believe.
The President of the United States thus wrote a personal check for the payment of hush money as part of a criminal scheme to violate campaign finance laws. And you can find the details of that scheme directed by Mr. Trump in the pleadings in the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York.
Okay, so again, going back to when we do the second video, you'll see what I'm talking about. He denies almost every single thing in those pleadings except for this. He says all the facts are inaccurate except for these. So how can all the facts be? Why would you plead guilty if all the facts were inaccurate? If they aren't accurate, if you didn't defraud the government, if you didn't violate taxes, if you didn't do shady things in the way they said that you did, why did you plead guilty? Because you were up for 70 years in jail, Michael. So don't sit here and tell me that you're doing this for the American people. You're up for 70 years, you got 3. And you're still bitching about that. You're a disgrace. Simple disgrace. This I just find kind of interesting, and I want to talk about it for just a second, because this guy's insane.
When telling me in 2008 or 2009 that he was cutting employees' salaries in half, including mine. He showed me what he claimed was a $10 million IRS tax refund. And he said that he could not believe how stupid the government was for giving someone like him that much money back during the campaign.
Okay, first of all, I mean, I understand 2008 was crazy, right? Especially for real estate market. But let's just say you take a job with someone, and then 6 or 8 months later, they tell you that the salary they agreed with you upon is being cut in half. Are you going to seek alternative employment at that point in time for yourself? Because a 50% cut in pay is significant, extremely significant, especially when you live in New York and we're going through the worst crisis since the Great Depression. So I just find it relatively difficult to believe. I do find it very easy to believe that Donald Trump said, I can't believe the government's so stupid they gave someone like me $10 million back. I believe that because that's the way Trump says it. I mean, that's the way he talks. It's extremely believable. And I believe that part of the reason why he ran for president is because the government's so stupid. And he realized that, and he knew that this country was on the precipice. And he knew that the thing that he had been preparing for his whole life, and it was time now. And finally, we're going to listen to him talk about Russia for a couple minutes, and then I will sum up my
have been raised about whether I know of direct evidence that Mr. Trump or his campaign colluded with Russia. I do not. And I want to be clear, but I have my suspicions. Sometime in the summer of 2017, I read all over the media that there had been a meeting in Trump Tower in June of 2016 involving Don Jr. and others from the campaign with Russians, including a representative of the Russian government, and an email setting up the meeting with the subject line, "Dirt on Hillary Clinton." And something clicked in my mind. I remembered being in a room with Mr. Trump, probably in early June of 2016, when something peculiar happened. Don Trump Jr. came into the room and walked behind his father's desk, which in and of itself was unusual. People didn't just walk behind Mr. Trump's desk to talk to him. And I recall Don Jr. leaning over to his father and speaking in a low voice, which I could clearly hear, and saying, "The meeting is all set." And I remember Mr. Trump saying, "Okay, good, let me know." What struck me as I looked back and thought about the exchange between Don Jr. and his father was, first, that Mr. Trump had frequently told me and others that his son Don Jr. had the worst judgment of anyone in the world, and also that Don Jr. would never set up any meeting of significance alone, and certainly not without checking with his father. I also knew.
Okay, again, typical liars, pathological liar type behavior. Now, it's very possible that Donald Trump has said that Don Jr. has bad, whatever. He can't set a meeting without getting some clearance first because of his judgment. He's got bad judgment. That's possible. I don't know if it's probable, but it's definitely possible. So what we know about that meeting was Jared was there, Manafort was there. It wasn't like Don Jr. was doing this by himself. It was the guy that reached out to Don Jr. So I'm sure even if it was going on, that he was talking about it, that's possibly true. Now, Trump has said he didn't know about this meeting. I don't think that Michael Cohen saying that Don Jr. came into the office and walked behind the desk and whispered something in his father's ear is proof that Donald Trump knew about this particular meeting. Who knows what Donald Trump knew? The only person who really knows that is Don and Don Jr. Secondly, it doesn't matter. It does not matter if Donald Trump knew about the meeting. How much opposition research was done on Donald Trump during the campaign? Way more than what was done on Hillary Clinton. The only real stuff that came out about Hillary Clinton was leaked by Seth Rich to WikiLeaks. It's not like Trump was out there digging around in the dirt. I mean, yeah, he was trying to find out what WikiLeaks was going to say. Who wasn't trying to find out what WikiLeaks was going to say at that point in time? If you were a living, breathing human being in the United States or even across the pond, you were trying to figure out what the heck Julian Assange had on Clinton. And if I were running against Clinton, I'd be taking all the calls in the world about her dirty corruptness and trying to find evidence of it so that I could put it out there for the American people. I mean, it's crazy to think. I mean, look at how dirty politics are. It's crazy to think that someone would say this is a crime. Now, on top of that, On top of that, this person, Natalia Veselnitskaya, the Russian lawyer, was not permitted in the United States. She had a client who had a trial, and she tried to get in with a visa. This revelation means that it was the Obama Justice Department that enabled the newest, most intriguing figure in the Russia-Trump investigation to enter the country without a visa. Okay? Let that sink in for a second. The person who is responsible for the Trump Tower Russia meeting, the Russian, was not permitted into the country. She had to get a special, what's called it's a probation or parole visa. The only people who can sign off on that type of visa that's never issued ever in life, ever, are the Attorney General for the United States and the Secretary of State for the United States, John Kerry and Loretta Lynch. The only way that woman is in the country is because Loretta Lynch and John Kerry signed off on it. So you tell me what you think. Personally, I think that this person was put into the Trump Tower by the Obama administration, because that makes sense. It doesn't make sense that the Obama administration is just letting this girl come in when she's not permitted to come in. Her visa expired in January. She had a parole visa to represent a person, a company that was a Russian company. So she comes in to represent them, then she leaves. Nobody actually knows how she got back in the country. All we know is that she was not allowed in the country, and that she got in the country a few months before this through Loretta Lynch and John Kerry signing off on it, and no one knows how her visa got here. And then they indict her so that she won't ever come back to this country. I wonder why they indicted her so that she'll never come back to this country. Because they don't want her telling her story to the American people. So the whole Trump Tower meeting is a sham. Granted, if this was a real campaign of politicians, this probably would have never happened because they would have seen right through it. But this is a guy who they've done business with before, who is linked to everybody in the dossier. I mean, all these people, if you actually look at the spider web, are linked together. And they're linked together through Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, John Kerry, all of that. Now, let me show you this. June 14th, 2016, just a couple days after the Trump Tower. There's Natalia Veselnitskaya sitting right behind ambassadors to Russia and the Ukraine, who are talking about Russia and the Ukraine, taking notes and texting Putin in Congress. This lady shows up with some of the most untrustworthy people. So, what we have established is that Michael Cohen demonstrably told things that were not true many times. And you could just look at facts to figure that out. We know that Donald Trump is a vain person who likes to be high on lists and likes to win. But we already knew that. We know that Russia collusion never happened, as far as Michael Cohen would say. And if Michael Cohen is the person who they say he is the one person besides Donald Trump who would know everything. I mean, that's just a fact. If he is who they say he is, he's the one person besides Donald Trump who would know everything. And lastly, we know that Julian Assange has denied ever talking to Roger Stone. We know that if that were under investigation, if that were true, it would be a part of the investigation and would not be permitted to be spoken in public testimony in front of the House. Now, let me tell you what's really going on here. This is what's really happening. This is the beginning of the impeachment proceedings. They are trying to destroy Donald Trump's public perception so that they can get his favorability down in the low 30%, high 20%, so that they can move forward with the impeachment proceedings. Everything is designed around that. The plan is designed to work this way. If you look at what Nancy's doing, you can see it. She's using Nadler, Maxine Waters, Elijah Cummings, and Adam Schiff to do all of this. If you see Maxine now, she's saying, "Oh boy, we might need to look at the Trump Foundation after he bought that painting for charity." You know, this is what's happening. So this was the cornerstone, the first brick of the foundation of impeachment here in the United States for Donald Trump. And they're going to move quickly because they understand they have a very short period of time to act on this, to get it to where it needs to be. So I would say in the next 3 to 6 months, you're going to see a whole host and flurry of witnesses and public testimony in this stupid circus that we call a Congress. These people do not represent the people of the United States. Not one of them. Yesterday, you had AOC and Nancy lock people in a room, the moderate Democrats that all just got elected in swing districts because they voted with the Republicans on an amendment to their gun confiscation bill. It was funny actually. AOC had to go back and forth like I think 6 times and re-vote because she didn't realize that the Republicans got this amendment on. So it's basically watching them twist in knots because do they want to confiscate your guns or do they want to protect illegal immigrants? Which is more important to them, protecting illegal immigrants or confiscating your guns? Because those are two pretty high things that are up there because that's their votes. That's how they get elected. Then it's also how they're going to take control of the country once they disarm us. And I know that sounds like hyperbole, but look at Venezuela. Do your own research. 2012, there was a ballot initiative. They all gave up their guns. And as soon as they gave up their guns, Chavez destroyed the country because the people can't fight back. The landmass of this country is much more red. The population centers are very blue. But there's 330 million weapons in this country, almost as many guns as people. I wouldn't want to be the tyrannical government that tries to take away the guns of the people and violate the Second Amendment. But in any case, all of this has to do with impeaching Donald Trump. So if you think this was a joke, which it was, you need to think more seriously about this, and you need to write to your representatives and write to your senators and explain to them that it is not your will for Donald Trump to be impeached over stuff like this. Stuff like this is why Donald Trump won the election. The American people are tired of it. And you know what? I'm glad that he's got these people to actually show who they are. That's the beauty of all of this. Is they're actually, because they have to fight, because we're fighting back for the first time in 100 years, they have to actually show the American people who they are and what they care about. So pay attention, people, because it's going to be fun, because you're going to finally get to see who the Democrats are and who they care about. And it's going to be fun to watch because it is going to be a massive implosion of the Democrat Party. If you want to know what they want, look no further than the Chicago mayoral race. That was a disgrace. You had 30% of the voting population show up for 2 Democrats. The Republicans aren't even allowed to run in those states anymore. Is that what you want? Is that what you want for your kids and your grandkids? Is that what you want for yourself now, today? It's not what I want. It was never what I wanted, and I never signed up for it. And I'm fighting back now. Thanks so much for listening. Please share amongst your social media. I know I picked up an extra subscriber, whoever that was. Thank you very much. I can't see most of it, so I do appreciate it. enjoy your weekend. I'm going to enjoy mine. I might get one more out today, but we do have some people coming into town at the Skittle household, so I'm not going to be able to be very, very diligent this weekend. But if I don't talk to you, I'll talk to you on Monday after we get more information about what a sham the government is that pretends to care about us. For Pontification Nation, this is Ricky Skittle, and I'm out.